Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Hello and welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. This is Jamie Saponaro and I'm here with my podcast partner, Jerry Kemble. And our topic today is mindfulness, trying to take some breaks for yourself. And I have to admit, this is something I am really bad at. I tend to get in my head too much on a particular task, and I just go. And sometimes I go until 11, 12 at night. I don't shut it down. And so I'm hoping to get some tips today from our guest. Jerry, who do we have?
So we have with us today Evan Whitehead, and his background, I think, really, he has been helping people forever. He's been a special education teacher, a crisis interventionist, a community outreach coordinator, a school district improvement specialist, and an assistant superintendent of special services. And he's done a lot of other jobs in between. And he is really focusing on the importance of mental health and social emotional learning. Now, Evan, is there a story behind this? What's fueled this passion?
Well, I think it's like anything else. It's willingness to improve yourself. And for me, that's always been important. And I think that there's some lessons that were learned, and through working on myself and healing and become a better person, I wanted to be able to share that message and some ideas that have worked with me and help others, especially in our field of education.
Oh, that's terrific. You know, right now, I was just thinking about it today. I hate to say this, but we're living in a society that's sick right now. Yeah. We're actually sick. And so this self-care is more important than ever before. And so I'm so excited to hear what you have to share with us about what you've done. And so tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've learned in your journey.
Sure. So I'm glad that you mentioned self-care, but I want to start back prior to self-care and talking about mental health, which you mentioned earlier. And I'm glad that, Jamie spoke about that as well, because there is no self-care without speaking about mental health. And I think that it's often easier and more palatable for us to talk about self-care, because then we don't have to talk about the true hard work of accepting and understanding mental health and mental illness. Self-care is obviously a way to take care and be preventative in terms of our mental health, and if we have mental illness, et cetera. But the reality is that this is all about health, and you talked about being healthy. And healthy comes in many forms, not just physical, but also emotional and mental health and our well-being. And I think that the pandemic has provided opportunities for us to truly see the deficits in terms of our lifestyle, and also how the deficits are within our profession. And it's ironic because most of us have always talked about wanting or needing more time in our lives, more hours in the day, more days in the week, right? More weeks in the month. And we've always talked about, if I had more time, I'd like to start this hobby again, or maybe I'll start working out more, or working on myself. Well, be careful what you wish for, right? Because the pandemic brought that to us. So over the past almost year now, there are two paths that most people could take. They could take the path of surviving. And with survival, we know that that's not intended to be sustainable, right? So the chemicals in our body that are given off when we're in survival mode to protect us can become toxic if they're overutilized, which is why panic and stress are not good, because they kick us into survival mode. And then the other way that we can look at it is striving, right, and thriving. And I I am happy to say that I felt during the pandemic, I've been thriving. And that's because I've had a mindset that has taken me from a place of being a victim and being in a situation where I feel I can't control something, but taking control, right? We have the ability to control our lives, control our energy that we give off and that what we receive as well. And I think that that's something that we need to look at and to be able to gain back and give ourselves permission to do that, because we're living in a society up until about a year ago in which everything was fast paced. Everything was instantaneous, instant gratification. Technology, for all its benefits and efficiency, actually causes us to try to cram more into the day than we typically would, instead of taking advantage of the time that it's given us, the additional time, because of the efficiency. So we try to pack more into the time that we have instead of using that time. And that's really, what mindfulness is rooted in. And that's being aware, and just being aware. For me personally, I was on the hamster wheel like everyone else. I was for many years. But at the end of the day, something has to give, right? And I think in our profession, like many other professions where people are givers, they're fixers, they're helpers, they're healers, we have a hard time holding back, and we have a hard time looking out for ourselves. We're the best advocates for everyone else. In education, we're the best advocates for our students, our families. If we're in leadership roles, we're the best advocates for the people that we serve. But for some reason, it's difficult for us to be our own advocate. And there's this culture in education that martyrdom is okay. And for some reason, it's continuously picked up, carried with us from year to year, from job to job, from district to district, school to school, what have you, and that we almost feel guilted if we aren't being the martyr, of giving everything that we have until we don't have anything left, right? We feel bad if we're not staying late after school as a teacher to grade papers or get ready for the next day, or if we don't come in. We're made to feel guilty, and we're conditioned to feel guilty if we're not grading papers on the weekend. Or for those of us that are in leadership, if we're not answering emails on the weekend that we get emails, and we're not looking at our if we have two phones, our work phone as well as our personal phone. And that's a problem. It truly is a problem, because, the rates of burnout in education, in terms of, lack of retention, and especially for teachers that are already working in high needs districts and schools and communities, when you compound this guilt complex in terms of needing to be the martyr and help everyone, the probability of them crashing and burning is pretty good. Right. Yeah. And you asked about, where does this come from? Well, I'm speaking my truth because that's my story. Right. I've always worked in the field of special education, special services. So I'm always working with the students with the greatest need, families with the greatest need, working with, what we used to call our populations that, for whatever reason, were subgroups, as we call them. So English learners, special education, Title I, and then working in communities that have some, socioeconomic challenges as well. And then other times working in districts that may be more financially well off and secure, but having changing demographics in terms of socioeconomic and race, ethnicity, and that having to also be that lifeline for those families and communities that are new and they're trying to learn how to navigate that. And for me, I didn't say no, right? Because I felt that I had to give everything that I possibly could, and feeling that way. So, I got to a point, in my career, it's my 23rd year in education, my 11th year in central office administration. And as you mentioned, I've had many roles. And, I got to a point in the latter part of my career where, someone told me a while ago that your body keeps score, right? Everything you put in your body, everything you eat, you drink, everything that you're supposed to be eating and you're supposed to be taking in that you don't, it counts the sleep that you get, that you don't get. It counts the hours of the day that you're in the sun when you're not supposed to be, and you don't protect yourself, and your body keeps scoring. Eventually, you're going to lose that game, right? So, when that happens is your body, your mind, everything, spirit is going to shut down. It's not sustainable. And for me, it got to the point where I didn't have a choice. And I speak to a lot of this because I don't want other people to experience what I did. But I also speak to it because I want to give people tips to understand and know that it's okay not to be okay, right? And I think during this pandemic, we've all realized that, right? Mentally and emotionally, we've all been on a roller coaster from mid-March when it was first announced that this pandemic is happening. There's this virus that's deadly. It was traumatic because everything that we knew in our lives stopped abruptly and we didn't have control over it. And then every month, something different was happening in terms of new information on the virus, more cases. We had a mindset and thinking, this is only going to last for a month, maybe a couple months, and everything will be back to normal. And every time that didn't happen, right, that affects your psyche. It affects your mental health. It affects your well-being, right? And then there are other manifestations, physiological, right? Financial, that are also other stressors because of this. And then when you see family members and friends start to get ill, and some people have passed away due to the virus, all of a sudden it's almost like the perfect storm. And then you add on the other ills of society that we saw this past year, from social justice, injustices, racial tension throughout the country. And it was on a continuous loop in terms of television, media, et cetera. All those things compounded, right, create for the perfect storm that if we are not really talking about how can we ground ourselves, how can we be preventive, how can we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves the best and be the best version of ourselves so that we can be the best version of the other people that we serve and that people that are counting on us, we're going to be in tough shape. So, truly, when I talk about this is why I started, discussing my framework of my 3 Bs, my balance, boundaries, and breaks. And as I was going through my healing and getting better and working on myself, there were 3 words and themes that kept coming in. And the first one was balance. And, balance in terms of, I was reflecting on my life and my career, and that everything for me, there was no middle ground. There was no middle path. It was 110% or nothing, right? So everything that I did. So what happens is I only knew one speed, right? So you only have so many hours in a day. You only have so much energy. You only can do that for so long. It's not sustainable, but I didn't know anything else. So what happened, I was pushing, and I wasn't pacing myself through life. I wasn't pacing my energy, and I wasn't mindful of it. And the next part of that is that balancing has to do with also making sure that the people that you work with, the people that you interact with, the projects and activities that you take on, that they're going to reciprocate some of that energy back to you as well. Because we always want to give. But the balance is about making sure that, your energy goes to the people that deserve it and are willing to reciprocate it. Because people will suck your energy if you let them, even if there's no malintent, right? Just because of the sheer nature of the type of person you are and because of what you do, right? People will do that. So you have to be mindful and protect yourself. So that's where the balance comes in.
So Evan, I think what you're saying then is that there's a breaking point, and we need to make sure that we get to a point that we can address our mental health to support it, to be stabilized. So that way, when those who need us are leaning on us, that we're not going to break and we can support them while still maintaining our own needs as well.
Definitely, that's correct. And I think that the sustainability part is huge. And that is why being an advocate for yourself in terms of your mental health is so important.
The balance, boundaries, and breaks, then, when we talk about those three pillars, your first, you already talked about having the balance, right?
Correct.
So when you talk about boundaries, what is the difference there? What are some things, what are the challenges involved?
Sure. So the boundaries is not what we typically think about. Typically, we think about understanding and respecting and adhering to the boundaries of others, which is important, 100%. However, we rarely think about adhering and implementing our own personal boundaries, and not just physical, but also emotional, spiritual, and mental. And, you know, for me, it came about because I was always trying to be everything for everybody, right? And that is dangerous because there's only so much of you to go around, and that's whether it's your energy or physically helping, you know, and that has a lot to do with feeling guilty at times and allowing ourselves to feel guilty, allowing people to guilt us. And a lot of times it's not malicious, and I want to be clear about that. You know, guilt in and of itself, right, comes often from different places. And it's not just, you know, I'm trying to do something to you to make you feel bad, but sometimes it is just the nature of who we are as people. You know, we see many of our religions, right? You make something, you're being made to feel bad so your behavior can change. But we have to also understand that guilt is a form of manipulation also. And mentally, manipulation is still bad, even if the source is not coming from a bad place. It is. And that's where the boundaries come in. And for me, like I was the educator, teacher, administrator that was staying late, staying there for all the activities, events. I was the one that was, you know, I was volunteering for the school dances to be the chaperone. You know, I was the one that, you know, when we needed a sponsor for a club, I did it. In my personal life with my family, you know, if we need an assistant coach for my son or daughter's athletic team because the coach didn't show up or dropped out, I did it. I picked up the ball because in my nature, right, I'm a giver. I'm a fixer. I try to do that. However, though, no one really cared about Evan, right? They never really cared. Like, if I was tired and I couldn't give anymore, did anyone really care about me? No, right? It would be nice if they did, but the reality is not the case. And people will do this to you also. People will definitely cross your personal boundaries that you put in place. And some of that is an easy way is sometimes if you have a friend, right? Or you have a relative that you've been friends with for a very long time, and it's your closest cousin or someone in your family. Every time you know that they're going to reach out to you, know they want something, right? Before you even pick up the phone or see that text message, you know, you're thinking, do I answer? Do I reply? Right. Because if I see the text message, is there another agenda behind it? Even if it's not really malicious, but is there another agenda behind it? And am I going to allow myself to be sucked in to that? And that's where the boundaries come into play. That's why the symbol I have is the hand up saying, no, stop. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow you to drain my energy. I'm not going to allow you to make me feel bad. I'm not going to allow you to talk about everything that's going on with you, but you're not checking with me. Right. That's not fair. We have this, a relationship, a friendship, whatever it is, it has to be mutual in whatever it is. And because every interaction, right, is a transaction of some sort, and it has to be mutual. And oftentimes people won't do that. And if you let them, they'll keep doing it. So that's where the boundaries come in. And I didn't do it. I wasn't good about that. I used to feel bad. But I realized that that was a deficit area for me. And it was causing me more stress than it was for me to help people. And people started, getting used to that and thinking, well, Evan will just do it. And so we have to do that in terms of our own personal lives so that we're not drained and made to feel bad.
Right. And people just expect it, and then they expect more and more. And when I've been in that situation, then I become resentful. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying no, I just become resentful. Mm-hmm. And that's not healthy.
No, it's not, because
it's better just to say no.
Just say no. Just say no. I can't. And why do we become resentful? We're resentful at ourselves because we allowed ourselves to get sucked into that again. Exactly. It's not the other person, because we have control of ourselves.
Right.
And resentment is a very powerful emotion, and I think it's probably going to be taking negative points away from our mental health. What you were talking about earlier, too.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%, because anytime that we are using our energy and it's going in a direction that is not going to be beneficial in terms of our health, right? Mm-hmm. That's a bad thing. So being in control of our emotions and our responses, not the reactions, because oftentimes reactions are an emotional response.
Yes. Yes.
And we react. So what happens? Prime example. You wake up, you start your day, everything is going great. You have a great day planned. You get out, start your car doesn't start, right? Does your car not starting, does it throw your entire day off? Or do you take that as just life, right? Things happen, they get in the way. Right. Most people allow that instant with their car not being able to start and then throwing their whole schedule off to now throwing their entire day off. And then when they arrive at work or their destination, what happens? It takes them almost the remainder of the day to level off to get to where they were in the morning when they started their day. And that's because their emotions took a hold of them and allowed them to react, and it threw everything off that they did. So that's why the boundaries are so important, extremely important. And then the last B is breaks. And this one for me was the hardest. This was the one where it really hit home for me as I was going through my therapy and my healing and working with people and just learning more about myself, was that, this is where the mindfulness comes in. So the 3 B's are rooting in mindfulness and dialectical behavioral therapy, but the mindfulness truly comes into the breaks, a pausing, right? Being just aware of everything from all 5 senses, right? The little things in life that we take for granted. If we pause for 1 minute and just be still and hear every sound that's going on in the room that we're in. Mm-hmm. We hear all the tiniest sounds, right? We can take a breath and breathe in. We can smell all these different smells, right? You can just touch something in the room. You can feel it, right? If you drink a glass of water, or if you have something to drink, you take something to eat, just that one bite, right? Allowing your senses to take over, that's where the pause comes into play, because we need that, right? We need to be able to pause. And the breaks also has to do with taking care of ourselves in terms of self-care. And that's why I said, I don't like to jump straight to self-care, because that misses all the other points that are important that we need to be aware about and recognize. And we can't brush those under the rug as if they don't exist. But the self-care is huge, and it comes in many different forms and whatever works for you. But we need to take that time for the self-care. And now, right, we know in education, first and foremost, right, the one thing is that we do not take sick days, right? We have to almost be until recently, right? But prior to a year ago, teachers come in when they're sick, right? They'll find a way to come when they're sick. Administrators, leaders, right? You don't take sick days. You just don't. And for some reason, we accept that in our culture. But what happens? Every time you don't take time to take care of yourself and rest and re-energize, it prolongs that illness or sickness. So maybe instead of having a 24 or 40-hour flu, now you have these lingering effects for a week, 2 weeks, and your energy level's down, right? And then you get tired, and then you can't perform at your peak. And so all these things have something to do with that. The other part of self-care is truly enjoying yourself, especially when we're in leadership positions. Most of us, myself included, and I say this because I stopped taking family vacations or vacations for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Stopped.
Right.
Just stopped. Why did I stop? Well, I started thinking, well, I'll get to it. I'll take a vacation when I'll get to it then. But I never did. And like many of us, I was forced to take vacation days at the end of the year because I could only carry so many over. So you lose them. So think about that. Just think about that for a minute and pause on that one. We have vacation days and sick days and personal days built into our schedule and into our day that we can utilize, but we're guilted almost into not utilizing them.
Mm-hmm.
That is so nonsensical.
Yeah.
Right. But we follow that, right? We all follow that. And it's for fear that we're going to look a certain way and how people are going to judge us. Right. But here's the thing. If we don't take time for the self-care, for the pause, to take breaks, okay, what people are going to say is the first thing when you get sick is what? You really need to take care of yourself.
Yes.
Right.
You really need to do this after you're sick, right?
Right.
After you're sick, after you get sick, after you end up in the hospital, whatever it is, people send you cards, get well soon, make sure you get rest, etc. But hardly ever do you hear people tell you that prior. And that's where the importance is of the awareness and the mindset about the breaks. And for me, I started mindfulness meditation. It was very simple. It was very easy because I was a person that did not believe in meditation. I could not see myself sitting somewhere, whether on the floor with my legs crossed or in a chair and just doing that. Like my mind would always be racing, right?
Sure.
But I learned how to do that. And it truly was no more than 10 minutes a day. And as the more I did it, the more I practiced, like any other muscle, there's muscle memory, right? And you begin to relax. And what I learned about meditation and mindfulness is that when you meditate, your mind does not have to be clear because we have active minds. The idea is that when we are meditating, are we able to slow down our mind and begin to see those pieces and things that are moving so rapidly where they make sense to us? Because your mind's never going to be completely clear as long as you're living and breathing. That doesn't make sense. But understanding that and accepting that space is what's critical. And 10 minutes out of one's day is like a lifetime. Just starting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sitting in a chair, closing your eyes. You don't need music. It doesn't have to be so extravagant. Now there's even guided meditation and apps and music, YouTube, so many ways you can do it, but you can start small and it builds, right? It's like anything else. You start small and you begin to build it. And before time, it gets longer, you get better at it, but you will see how much you truly cherish time because now all of a sudden 10 minutes out of your day where you're truly unplugging, right? No cell phone, no email, no television, no screen time, no nothing. And you realize how long 10 minutes truly is to be in that space, to be in control, right? When we're not mindful and we don't pause, we're not in control of our lives, right? Externally, we're being pushed and pulled in other directions. But taking that back and being in control is extremely powerful. And it's great for our mind, body, and spirit. And as we begin to talk about and get better at the breaks, we build in other forms of self-care. It could be working out. Maybe you get into running and marathons, and maybe you get into lifting weights. Maybe you take yoga, maybe martial arts, maybe just walking around your neighborhood, every day when the weather's warm. It's great. For me, what I learned in my first year or so and doing my mindfulness walks, when I started working out that way, I would walk in every condition because it gave me the opportunity to experience, right, all the elements, all of my senses at different times. Because if I'm only experiencing a mindful walk when it's 70 degrees out and it's pleasant, the wind's not blowing, I can't translate that into real life. Because in real life, the weather changes all the time and things in our life change. So I have to be able to learn to adapt and experience it and accept what's happening and just be present.
Yeah, I think and that's the hardest part for me, is I kind of feel like I'm not good at mindfulness, so I don't do it. But I think your point is that the more you practice it, the better you become, and accepting of the fact that it's not going to be the perfection that you think it is. It is actually a good mindfulness session, even if you do have those thoughts creeping in, because as you pointed out, you're able to dissect those a little bit and be at peace with those and maybe see how they might interact instead of everything kind of flying in at once. So it kind of relaxes and calms down those thoughts, and it's okay then if they're there. And then I also appreciate the fact that, when I try to do it, I do it outside. And so I haven't been doing it outside when it's cold, but I too appreciate all of the different, leaving the computer, leaving the house, leaving the dishes, leaving the laundry, being outside, listening to the birds fly by, listening to those things brings me peace. And it does help remove some of those thoughts. But practicing it daily allows you to put it into practice when you need it later on, so that you don't have those reactions as you talked about, but instead you can respond much better to things that might happen out of the norm in your life. So all of these things you're saying, I'm kind of putting together. I just have to put it into practice. So that's my, it's hard. It's hard for me, but I think it's such a good point that you made. Mindfulness is what you make it to be. It doesn't have to be the perfection that we read about. And I think not giving up and instead making incremental steps toward something better for you is really the way to go.
And incremental steps I like, because so many times I just want to do this big extravagant thing when I think if I can just do baby steps, I might be more successful. And that's what I'm hearing you say. Just start with one small thing and that'll move you to the next bigger thing. Is that
definitely so? Because a word that we use in our profession, a term, is growth mindset. But how often do we truly implement that into our daily lives and practice, right? Just the conversation that we're having now about increments, small steps, any progress is progress, right? Being vulnerable enough to even have a conversation and say, I've tried, I'm not very good at it, but I want to get better, right? If we are doing that and saying growth mindset so much in the field of education, we need to practice that too in real time. And The students that we work with, they need to see us with the growth mindset. They need to see us showing vulnerability. They need to see us that we don't know everything. Our colleagues need to be able to see that side of us. And especially our leaders, we need to show that we're vulnerable, that we're real, that we may not know everything and have all the answers. However, we're here to grow together and to get better. And that's putting all of it into daily practice, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Balance, boundaries, and breaks. This has been really helpful. I'm really going to be mindful about this and putting these into practice. There's so many things. Again, it's a rat race, as you described. So it's so important to really take these into consideration. What are just a couple tips for getting started?
Sure, definitely so. So first and foremost, I'm going to give you a very, very easy tool in terms of mindfulness. Okay. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it goes in any direction, any order, and it basically is of the 5 senses. So, right. So we have our sight, right? We have sound, our hear, auditory, our sense of smell, our taste and touch. And you literally count backwards. And so, for example, you're in a room, you want to have complete silence, and there's 5 sounds that you can hear, and you name them. You hear them and you name them. Okay. Then you go and there's 4 things that you can see in the room, right? You see them, you name them, right? Then there's 3 things or smells that you can smell in the room, right? And then there's 2 things that you can touch. And then the last one is 1 thing that you can taste. And you can change the order. It doesn't matter what sense has 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. You can change it. And it's good to change that. But the reality is that as you do that, it slows down your mind.
You're intentional.
Right? It's intentional, right? And it begins to build a practice of breathing, because as you're counting, right? If we are anxious, typically our heart rate's increasing. So therefore, when you force yourself to do each of those senses, it causes your heart rate to lower, right? So then now we're breathing better. We're breathing differently, and it calms us down. By the time we get to 1, right, you will be calm. And there's also another way you can do this. You can carry something in a small pouch, bag, purse, etc. You can carry things that relate to your senses in there. And when you get anxious, nervous, you want to calm down, you go in the bag, right? So you have something you can smell, you have something you can touch, have something you can taste, something you can see, something you are able to hear, right? And it just calms you down. And that's the first mindfulness exercise and tool that I ever learned. And I still use it to this day.
I love that.
And so it's very easy, very simple. So that's a very quick mindfulness tool. And the other part is, in terms of mindfulness, remember, if you want to begin meditation, okay, all you need is a chair. You don't have to sit cross-legged. You don't have to have a certain pose. Sit in a chair, feet planted on the floor or the ground. You have your hands cupped in your lap or to your side. Close your eyes and just simply breathe in 2 counts and exhale 1 count. And just keep doing that. Your breathing will slow down because you're forcing yourself and listening and working on the breathing. You can, it doesn't even matter what count you do. You can do 5 inhales and count of 4 for exhale, just so you begin to have a rhythm to focus on your breathing. Right. The first and most important part of starting the foundation of mindfulness and meditation is your breathing, being centered and grounded. So those are some steps that I would definitely give out to everybody to begin their journey.
Oh, I like it. I like it because I, when I listen to intentions and people telling me things on recordings that I have, that's when my mind goes. But I really especially like your tips of the 5 senses counting down, because I'm still in control, right? I'm still using my mind, but it's being used in this mindful way. So I like that a lot. And I think that is something that's really going to help me with my constantly moving brain. So this will keep my mind moving, but keep it intentional. I like it a lot.
So a friend of mine who is a psychiatrist has coined the term neural style. And I love that because we all have our own neural style, right? So we can't, we're not the same. So as we embrace our neural style, we understand ourselves and we understand how we think. So therefore, we're able to adapt what we need to be successful in life.
Love it.
Yes. Oh, this has been fascinating. I'm going to go try these things.
Me too.
Right after the show. I really am.
Me too.
How many breaks should you take a day? Is there a number of breaks you should take a day?
There's
just kind of how you feel.
How you feel. And that's the other thing, getting in tune with yourself and what feels right, and understanding and tapping in to yourself and your intuition of how you feel. We all have that, right? You know when you're starting to feel like you're reaching that point before it boils over, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's fear. You can feel your body giving you signs and symptoms and talking to you. So that's when you do it, right? Don't get to the point where you're intervening before it gets to that point doing it. Just for example, when you're eating, as you're getting full, but most people stop eating when they're full, right? When their stomach's full. Do it beforehand. The same thing with being able to take a break and understand it. You know when it is, trust your body, trust your instincts, and follow it.
Yes. Oh, these are great tips. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And for all your listeners, make sure that if they can, try to implement my 3 Bs and remember they're in control of themselves and their energy. Peace and blessings.
And Evan, before you go, where can they find you?
Sure. You can find me. My social media home is Twitter. And I'm on my Twitter handle is Evan Whitehead 00 at Evan Whitehead 00. And I'll even give out my email address too. So if you want to contact me for whatever reasons, consulting, coaching, talking, feedback, because that's kind of another role that I do as well. And my email address is evanwhitehead11@gmail.com. evanwhitehead11@gmail.com.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.